What happened to the debasement trade? Just a couple weeks ago, everyone was excited when gold was surging, but it looked like things have changed substantially. And why? We had every commentator on YouTube creating videos using the word debasement trade in their videos. Every article that came out had debasement trade somewhere in the headline. But now it says debasement trade just hit a wall. This couldn't be farther from the truth. Because no matter what the price of gold really is in USD terms, I believe that's the wrong way of looking at it. Because anybody that understands the real nature of money, and in particular, lawful money, knows it has everything to do with one single word on this old Federal Reserve note. And I bet you can't guess what it is. But let's talk about it. All right, so I want to take a minute and share my 2 cents on a variety of subject matter, and in particular, the redemption trade is what I'm referring to as, not necessarily the debasement trade. That's what we've been given from Wall Street to provide a narrative for the surge in gold over the last week or two. But then again, we've had the last 48 hours of a suppression, and it's mighty quiet in reference to the debasement crowd. So I wanted to share my 2 cents and just point to the true, tried, and tested historical viewpoint on the importance of gold and why, despite the USD price, it's still worth paying attention to and pursuing the actual physical possession rather than listen to the narratives that are being given to us today. And so I'm going to go through a lot of headlines as well as bring some historical evidence to my case here. But as always, for those who want to plug in and make sure you receive these notifications when they come out, definitely hit that thumbs up to show your support for the channel. Drop a comment down below. Let me know what you're keeping your eyes on. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you never miss one. And if you find any value here, which I'm sure you will, then take this and share it so more people can get a true alternative perspective as to what's going on. But first, let's take a quick look at the metals activity as of right now. And so we are still below $4,000, which once again is a good thing. And then of course we have a resurgence of gold and silver. Looks like early morning activity with silver being in the green. And so that's always a good thing. But let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into it. So the primary article I want to touch on today was posted this morning, and it says the debasement trade just hit a wall and the bond market knows something gold bugs don't. And so when I saw this, I'm thinking like, wow, what better way to try to paper over the narrative and to provide some cover for the appearance of bond yields dropping as well as the fiat currency dollar strengthening some, because gold has cooled off slightly. But then again, we ultimately know where all this is heading. And so I like to just filter through some of the noise here so people can get a real take as to what's going on, despite what we're being told from mainstream media. But let's just jump right into this real quick here. It says the narrative sounded perfect. Gold soaring past records, Bitcoin rallying, and stocks climbing relentlessly. All signs that investors were fleeing the dollar in a panic over the U.S. currency debasement. But if you check what's actually happening in the bond and foreign exchange market, the story falls apart fast. It says, while precious metals have indeed surged impressively this year, gold jumping 50% with silver and platinum posting even more dramatic gains, the markets that matter most for debasement fears are telling a completely different story. And that disconnect reveals something crucial about what's driving today's market moves. And then it goes on to talk about when the bond market contradicts the gold rally, and then the dollar isn't cooperating either. And so that alone right there lets me know that something right there is up. Because it's obvious. If you look at the last year's activity denominated in USD terms, gold has been surging well before this debasement trade narrative came about. And that should lead people to wonder how we even arrived at those two words being associated in this particular time to paint a narrative that suits the bankers. And this was the particular headline that came out a few weeks ago, why it says, why Wall Street is obsessing over debasement trade. And right there to me is a red flag, because when you have the bullion banks, aka the banksters, all those that have collaborated and worked together for decades now to suppress the price of gold and silver, it wasn't because they were bored. It was because creating the futures markets after the gold window was closed in 1971, and with the rebranding of gold from being money to a commodity in 1974, when the futures market started, it was always done to benefit the banks because they were able to actually trade paper over physical metals. And so now that things are unwinding, it looks like they're going to try to shift the narrative, provide some cover to protect themselves, while ultimately trying to buy time for the bullion banks to try to get their stuff in order, because clearly the Eastern Hemisphere is driving the price of gold and silver up. And when the overall narrative becomes harder to control, desperation sets in. Therefore, we get more bogus headlines to try to divert our attention to look that way, while in actuality, everything is plain today. That the Federal Reserve note no longer carries the weight that it used to. Literally. And so regardless of the price of gold as of today, the banker's narrative of a debasement trade is still in play, but it's not actually what it seems to be under the surface. Because in my opinion, it's more to do with nation states as well as governments realizing that we're at the end of the debt road, and it's literally a return back to sound money, aka lawful money, and what I consider to be the fiat redemption trade. And so look no further than an article came out today. And this is from Bloomberg. And it says Bank of Korea may buy gold in a medium term after a long hiatus. So you have to ask yourself a question. Why exactly would another central bank be buying gold or redeeming debt instruments in place of lawful money? And of course, I'll let you speculate as to why that is, but yet we've been documenting this purchase by purchase, central bank by central bank, so it shouldn't be nothing new. But just a little cover for what they got going on here. It says South Korea's central bank is weighing plans to add to its gold reserves for the first time in more than a decade, potentially joining a wave of purchases by monetary authorities around the world that help push bullion prices to record highs. It goes on to say the Bank of Korea plans to consider additional gold purchase from a medium to long-term perspective. It says the last time the bank added to its gold reserves was back in 2013, according to Jung, speaking at an event hosted by the London Bullion Market Association. So just with that little short excerpt there, you have to ask yourself a question. Why would another central bank be looking to buy gold, especially having not purchased any in the last 12 years? So it's clear, it's day to me, that that's the place to end up at the end of this whole debt bonanza that the world is witnessing right now. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, given the fact that Federal Reserve notes and fiat currency in general were always meant to be temporary substitutes described as legal tender between two parties, which came about in the collaborative efforts between central banks and governments. And the people in the meantime, who initially had gold and silver in their possession, were incentivized to deposit gold and silver into the banks in exchange for receipts and allow these receipts to circulate until you went back to redeem your actual lawful money. And of course, look no further than his 1934 Federal Reserve note. Once you zoom in here, you get a chance to see exactly what I'm referring to. Here it says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or at any Federal Reserve bank. And this was a series of 1934. And so here we are, a long time away from the issuance of that note there, but the concept haven't changed. What the government and the banks used to actually honor in reference to being able to redeem those notes, the people nowadays, and we're witnessing governments and central banks do the exact same thing for themselves. And that's why monetary literacy is so important, because it lets the people know what money really is and what it was always intended to be. Not fiat currency, you nothings. And just to give you a little history lesson, if you look on Investopedia, when it talks about lawful money and what is lawful money, it says lawful money is any form of a currency issued by the United States Treasury and not the Federal Reserve System. You get that? And not the Federal Reserve System. It includes gold and silver coins, treasury notes, and treasury bonds. Lawful money stands in contrast to fiat money or fiat currency, in which the government assigns value, although it has no intrinsic value of its own and is not backed by reserves. It says fiat money includes legal tenders such as paper, money, checks, drafts, and banknotes. And then it says lawful money is also known as specie, which means in actual form. And then it goes on to get some key takeaway here. But it says here, the difference arises from the U.S. Constitution, which specifies gold and silver as legal tender form of tender for debts. Hence the very interpretation, since new forms of payment came into circulation. And so at the end of the day, we're always be witnessing what history will dictate as a fiat redemption trade, in my opinion, because simply taking the government and the central banks up on their initial offer from over 100 years ago almost of being able to redeem Federal Reserve notes is the proper and correct thing to do if you want to protect and preserve everything you work hard for. Because at the end of the day, redemption is simply the act of redeeming or the condition of having been redeemed, or the recovery of something pawned or mortgaged, i.e. the people's gold or silver that was supposed to be in the vaults waiting for the depositors when they return these fiat notes here. And then someone new here might be wondering, so what is this all about? Why is this so important? It's simple. Gold and silver is not moving just because it has nothing better to do. It's moving because people are racing to get out of U.S. liabilities, aka our debt instruments, as well as our currency, in droves. And despite the correction of the price, temporarily speaking, no one's really actually selling gold or silver. It's all the paper manipulation and the futures contracts the banks themselves have benefited from day one. Because one thing is for certain, no matter who your favorite president is, they all contributed to the debasement of our currency, putting the users of the Federal Reserve in a very tight position to where we've lost over 97 to 98% of our purchasing power to date. And it all started with the creation of our third central bank, aka the Federal Reserve Bank. So this isn't just solely a matter of debasement, it's a matter of purchasing power preservation. And the fiat redemption trade is taking place regardless of the narrative that's being given to us from the mainstream media. So once again, just taking a minute to share my 2 cents as to what I believe is really taking place now, despite the USD spot price at this current moment, we know physical gold and silver is where it's at. So don't be deceived when you see a headline that says that the debasement trade hit the wall, because we all know China, Russia, and everybody else is not stopping accumulating gold and silver. They just want the people in the US here to believe that it's not anything worth continuing to pursue. But once again, just taking a minute to share my 2 cents. Curious to hear what you think. If you found any value here, which I know there's a lot of it, then take it and share it so other people can hear this alternative perspective here. And then if you got thoughts, ideas, drop a comment down below. And if you're new, make sure you subscribe so that you'll never miss out. I drop one of these little quick takes here. And then last, I don't want to give you all this information without leaving some recommendations for you to consider. What if your money actually held its value? Gold backs are real gold. Each note infused with 24 karat gold you can actually hold, spend, or save. Accepted by local merchants across several U.S. states, gold backs let you trade with something timeless, gold itself. It's beautiful, durable, and inflation resistant. So why trust paper when you can carry real value in your wallet? Discover gold backs, the world's first spendable gold currency. Redeem the fiat while there's someone that still wants it. To find out more or to get yourself some, visit buygoldnotes.com or just click the link in the description. Other than that, enjoy your day.